Senator John McCain's health battle.
It was like hitting us all in the face with a board.
We give you an update on his brain cancer diagnosis and hear from his colleagues in the Senate. Pro-life president.
You picked a winner.
On Donald Trump's 6-month anniversary in office, we look back on what he's done to protect the sanctity of life. Catholic-Orthodox relations. A top Vatican official is heading to Russia. And we'll meet the originalist. My conversation with the actor who plays Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, a legal giant and devout Catholic. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, July 20th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Americans pray for Arizona Republican Senator John McCain, who has been diagnosed with an aggressive brain cancer. His friends say the former prisoner of war isn't backing down from this battle to save his life. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us with more. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Senator McCain says he's grateful for all the support he's received, and with his usual great sense of humor, he says, unfortunately for his political opponents, he'll be back soon, so stand by.
Let us pray. Place your healing hand on Senator John McCain. Astound us with your power.
As his colleagues pray for him, Senator John McCain recovering at home in Arizona. The 80-year-old former Republican presidential nominee had a blood clot removed last week, and lab results from that surgery confirmed the presence of brain cancer.
Senator McCain, as we all know, has never shied away from a fight. And I assure you, he isn't going to back down now.
This isn't McCain's first fight with cancer. He had skin cancer removed in 1993, 2000, and 2002. Doctors say the average survival rate for this type of brain cancer is about 14 months. President Trump says Senator John McCain has always been a fighter. Melania and I send our thoughts and prayers to Senator McCain, Cindy, and their entire family. Get well soon. Staffers say McCain wants to get back to Washington as soon as possible, as do those on the other side of the aisle.
He is a clarion voice for human rights, the rule of law, the promotion of democracy in the world, and he stands up for those views regardless of who sits in the White House.
Family and friends say the political maverick won't take this fight against cancer laying down.
God knows how this ends, not me. But I do know this. This disease has never had a more worthy opponent.
Senator McCain, a Republican known for reaching across the aisle here at the Capitol, has a 100% pro-life voting record on the abortion issue, according to National Right to Life. Lauren?
Jason, you've run into the senator often at the Capitol. Tell us what he's like behind the scenes.
He's always accessible, always willing to take reporters' questions. He has a great sense of humor. I remember last year working on a package leading up to the debates, and I asked him what tips does he have for the candidates, and he said at that time, why would anybody listen to me? He was the one that lost the White House. I know his family has, said they're very shocked by this cancer diagnosis, and they're asking for prayers. His daughter Megan with a tweet asking for prayers.
Thank you so much. Correspondent Jason Calvi at the Capitol. As soon as the news broke of Senator McCain's diagnosis, our next guest, who was meeting with Republicans about health care, led that group in prayer. Senator James Lankford, a Republican from Oklahoma, joins us now. Welcome to the program, Senator.
Thank you. Glad to be with you again.
Let's begin with the news of Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona, who has been diagnosed with brain cancer. You know and work with him very closely. How has this affected the Senate and you personally?
It was a shock to our system. There were many of us that were last night, late night, working through on a health care conversation in a closed-door meeting, trying to be able to hammer through some policy issues when all of our phones lit up with the news. We stopped and had prayer for John and his family immediately, but it was like hitting us all in the face with a board. Just that shocking moment of thinking, what just happened, not only to John McCain and for his family, but to the Senate as well.
Well, I know
he has been around the Senate for a very long time.
I know I hate to move on immediately to legislative affairs, but what will his absence mean?
Well, he is the 50th vote in all likelihood on health care, so his vote will be exceptionally important. There are 2 members that have already said there's no way they can vote for any health care proposal that's out on the table of either direction. So we're down to the 50 that are here that are all be required, him being one of those. And so legislatively, his vote is obviously exceptionally important. We're also currently debating what's called the National Defense Authorization. He is the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. That is a major bill that we do every single year that we were literally within a week of actually bringing that up. So it's very significant on armed forces, and it's very significant actually on health care.
You met with the president yesterday and with Leader Mitch McConnell this morning. Do you feel confident Republicans can send a repeal bill to the president to sign?
I do feel confident we can do it. I do not feel confident it can happen in the next week. There are a few details that are still getting worked out, but everybody is trying to work towards getting the final solution here to make sure that it is correct. And that's our best possible option, not only to take care of people that are in poverty, that have the greatest need, but to also provide reduced rates for everyone that is actually buying on the open market as well. So those become 2 major issues to make sure that we're balancing.
Sure. It is seeming to the outside person that this is impossible, that all of you can't sit down together and get something to happen. What is it going to take?
Well, actually, we're doing that all for about 3 hours last night with about 20 members that gathered around a table trying to hash through those kind of details. As everyone knows, this is exceptionally technical work to be able to work through it. Everything that you make a change makes a change somewhere else. We're working to actually try to get to that agreement. We'll have a vote to try to move to get onto the bill next week, which hopefully will get onto the bill in a formal debate, be able to put in a formal legislative structure, and to be able to move. But everyone wants to be able to get this finally resolved, but everyone also knows it's extremely important to every American.
It is. Senator James Lankford, Republican from Oklahoma, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
The Congressional Budget Office estimates that a revised version of the Senate Republican health care bill would increase the number of uninsured people by 22 million in 2026. That's the same number projected to lose coverage under the first version of the legislation. The CBO also estimated that a repeal-only measure would result in 32 million people losing coverage. Attorney General Jeff Sessions says he's staying on despite new comments President Donald Trump made to the New York Times that if he knew Sessions would recuse himself from the Russia investigation, he wouldn't have hired him. President Trump slammed his AG during this interview, saying he wouldn't have picked him for the job if he knew he'd recuse himself. The Alabama Republican was the first sitting senator to back President Trump's presidential bid. Today marks 6 months of Donald Trump's presidency. From a Catholic perspective, what grade does the president receive? Correspondent Mark Irons helps us answer that question. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. On the campaign trail, Donald Trump made promises that pleased many Catholics and other socially conservative faith-based communities. Tonight, we take a look at the president's actions on the issue of life. Trump used to be pro-choice before he became president, but so far as commander-in-chief has defended a child's right to be born.
Our rights are given to us by a divine authority, and no earthly force can ever take those rights away.
Many people of faith agree. And for pro-life Catholics, the right to life is non-negotiable. Before his election, President Trump addressed the concerns of Catholics, promising, "I am and will remain pro-life."
He's doing a very good job.
Marilyn Musgrave works for the Susan B. Anthony List, a pro-life lobbying group that helps elect pro-life lawmakers. She says the president's team says it all.
I'm very encouraged about the people the president surrounds himself with. When you look at Vice President Mike Pence, I mean, there's nobody more pro-life than the vice president.
Life is winning again in America.
At the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast, he said this:
American Catholics have an ally in President Donald Trump.
Pro-life Americans are pleased with the appointment of conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court and with one of Trump's first actions in office.
I have also reinstated the Mexico City policy, first put into place by Ronald Reagan to protect the unborn.
Trump's expansion of that policy keeps U.S. aid money from funding abortions abroad. The U.S. bishops are applauding advances in the pro-life cause, but they are also voicing concern.
The policies relating to immigrants and refugees, they have not been encouraging, and the bishops deal every day, I think, with some of the fear that immigrants are facing in their communities as they kind of reconcile the new administration's approach to immigration enforcement.
Ashley Feasley, who works for the U.S. Conference of Bishops, says immigration is a life issue.
It's really important to understand just how much the bishops care about all stages of human life, not only the unborn, but those young people and those families who are struggling to escape persecution, to escape poverty.
Plenty of pro-life Catholics did not support President Trump in the election, and they were vocal about it. In a statement titled "An Appeal to Our Fellow Catholics," Robert George and George Weigel said they couldn't trust him on pro-life issues. That statement was signed by more than 30 prominent Catholic intellectuals. Lauren.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. Senators confirm a pro-life federal judge who once called abortion and slavery the two greatest tragedies in our country. The 51-47 vote elevated Kentucky lawyer John Bush to the post on the Cincinnati-based Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Bush was strongly supported by fellow Kentuckian Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He received his law degree from Harvard and once served as one of former President Ronald Reagan's attorneys during the Iran-Contra investigation. Residents of Raqqa, Syria, who escaped their town after public killings and hangings fear ISIS will return and seek revenge. 8,000 of about 200,000 displaced from that northern Syria city have found safety in a housing camp. It's run by a civilian authority. Police did arrest suspected ISIS members in that camp earlier this week. The offensive in the terror group's self-declared capital of Raqqa started last year. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte travels to the besieged southern city of Marawi. He thanked the troops for their heroism and sacrifice as they try to stop a nearly 2-month-long uprising by ISIS-linked militants. Duterte has asked lawmakers to extend martial law until the end of the year. And the latest round of Brexit talks wraps up in Brussels. One of the biggest stumbling blocks moving forward will be agreeing which court will have the final say in settling legal disputes after the UK leaves the European Union. The Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, is visiting Russia next month on behalf of Pope Francis. He will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Orthodox leaders. While the Pope hasn't visited Russia, he has met with President Putin and the Russian Orthodox Patriarch Kirill. Here to discuss the trip is Dr. Robert Moynihan, founder of the Urbi et Orbi Foundation, which works to strengthen ties between Catholics and other Christians around the world. Welcome to the program. You know Russia very well and recently made a visit and briefed the Cardinal and other Vatican officials. What is the significance of this visit?
The significance of this visit is that we are preparing for closer relations with the Russian Orthodox Church, the Orthodox churches in general, and better relations with Russia. I know in America this sounds quite odd right now.
It absolutely does, yes.
Yes. And I myself just was in Moscow and also Kiev for several days. It was a beautiful trip, completely safe, and visited churches and talked with officials, and the Cardinal will go on the behalf of the Pope. The Cardinal is the #1 diplomat who works for Pope Francis.
Cardinal Parolin.
Pietro Parolin. He will meet with President Putin, and he will meet also with Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church.
The Ukraine and Syria are likely to come up. Will the talks have an impact on the situation in the Ukraine?
Well, we can't predict the future. All talks are helpful. I think the Vatican feels that by talking, they can help the peace process, both in Ukraine and in Syria.
The Russian Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church have not been in communion for centuries, and there are many significant theological differences. Do you think Pope Francis would ever visit Russia?
I am hopeful that Pope Francis could visit Russia, and I think this trip is a sign that it's coming closer. Can't predict when it might happen. Francis likes to go to the peripheries, and Russia, under sanctions in some way, is a periphery right now.
Dr. Robert Moynihan, founder of the Urbi et Orbi Foundation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, former Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli on the Senate's failed efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. And remembering those famous words.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
48 years later. Parole granted. A parole board is allowing O.J. Simpson to be set free after almost 9 years in prison for armed robbery. He says he's done his time and would like to get back to his family and friends.
I am sorry that things turned out the way they did. I had no intent to commit a crime.
Several testified, including the robbery victim of that 2007 crime. The 70-year-old former football, TV, and movie star will be released in October after serving his minimum term. A prominent conservative says President Trump's treatment of Attorney General Jeff Sessions in the New York Times is the kind of behavior he'd like to see stop. Joining us now is Ken Cuccinelli, former Attorney General for the state of Virginia, currently serves as the president of the Senate Conservatives Fund. Welcome to the program.
Good to be with you again.
Well, big news. Donald Trump gives an interview to the New York Times, and he attacks,
well, everybody,
as they say, everybody here in Washington, right?
Yeah.
But in particular, saying that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has really disappointed him.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, this is sort of the every few weeks or a few months sort of fuming by the president, and he does this, and I wish he didn't do this. But with respect to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, he's still upset at the Russia recusal. And it's interesting, the New York Times interview suggests to me that the president never knew then Senator Jeff Sessions talked to the Russian ambassador, which takes one little piece off the scale if you think there's some grand Trump conspiracy to work with the Russians. If he didn't even know about that, it suggests otherwise. So but other than that, it's pretty ugly. Council law any longer.
Christopher Wray, FBI pick, was approved unanimously today by the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he has said that he will be a strict independent, that he will go by the book, playing it straight, and faithful to the Constitution. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly you see what I zero in on. I expect an FBI director to be independent. I expect them to be by the book. But first and foremost, I expect them to be faithful to the Constitution. And in the last administration, not Director Comey so much, but that attitude was lacking. And it's important for high government officials to reaffirm that. I think that Mr. Wray wouldn't have been approved unanimously on a bipartisan basis if they didn't have confidence that he would be independent, that he would be professional, that he would carry the FBI forward in the dispassionate way that is expected of an FBI director, and frankly, that I think Jim Comey failed to do over the course of the last year and more.
All right, I have to ask you one question before we go.
Right.
In a radio interview with Todd Starnes, you said, look at Steve Scalise. God help him recover from his gunshot wounds. But the fact is, he sold his conservative soul to be in the leadership.
Yep.
Come on. Isn't that a little mean? The guy is still in the hospital.
And that's what I started with. I hope he gets out and gets healthy, but I also hope he gets back to being a conservative. You look at his voting record, including in Louisiana, where he's from, before joining the leadership and after. He has undermined conservatives. He has not merely not been conservative, he has been anti-conservative. He has joined the deceitful cabal and the system that leadership used, including under John Boehner, that has continued, sadly, with a happier, nicer face under Paul Ryan, to undermine conservatives, to not tell them the truth, to not follow through on the commitments to conservatives, and he himself has not voted conservative since he joined the leadership. And it is undermining a good policy for America. That's what it's ultimately about.
Do you think Paul Ryan sold out?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Nice face, nice guy. You really want to like him. He's so nice. But he lied. It is documented how he lied to conservatives. But this is about policy. It's about what's best for all Americans. It isn't whether Joe or Fred or Nancy is nice to you or not. Nice is a tactic in Washington.
Understood. And this is why you are the president of the Senate Conservatives Fund. So thank you so much for joining us. Ken Cuccinelli, former Attorney General for the state of Virginia.
My pleasure.
Up next, the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia is remembered on stage. Plus, the Pope's advice for one daring little boy. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia passed away suddenly last year. A play in its second run celebrates his legacy. The original list portrays a series of conversations between Scalia, a conservative, and his liberal law clerk. I sat down with Edward Giro, the actor playing Justice Scalia. Edward Giro, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Lauren. Thank you.
What do you want the audience to take away from this big man, the character, Justice Antonin Scalia?
This provocateur, this eloquent orator. You know, as I said to him, that the play, although it covers him, it's really about our civil discourse. Here we have someone who's a lightning rod for the left, very conservative, and here he is in chambers with a self-described flaming liberal.
Harvard Law,
African-American woman.
Clerk.
Exactly. John wanted to explore the political center. What's happened to John Strand, the playwright. Yes. What's happened to the political center? And
does it even exist?
Well, it doesn't anymore. I think it's today. It's hard to say, right? I mean, it's hard to say that it exists at all. But this play shows these two characters from the far ends of the political spectrum speaking to each other and listening to each other, practicing civil discourse. What does that mean? It means that I'm listening to someone who has quality. So they're not vilifying each other because of the political positions they hold, but they're willing to listen and be impacted by each other.
And that was him.
That was him. It didn't matter to him if you didn't agree. In fact, he kind of had affection for you because then he could argue with you.
Right.
And then he got into the nuts and bolts of what he loved to do, which was to tear an argument apart.
And as a lawyer,
find the best idea. And as a lawyer, that's what you do. That's the job.
Right.
That's the job.
That's right. Let's listen to you perform as Justice Scalia talks about how he believes he is perceived.
I tell people what they don't want to hear. That's also what makes me a monster. That's how half the country sees me. Aggressive, combative, law and order conservative. The other half sees me as a hero.
Is this an accurate description of him?
Oh, absolutely. These are his words. So
his words.
Absolutely.
Specific
he said it
words.
in public. Absolutely. That, some people think I'm a hero and some people think I'm a monster. And which is it? And it sort of puts in high relief how we think of him. Because he's very adamant about what he believes.
As the Supreme Court prepared to hear the Defense of Marriage Act, that United States versus Windsor, right? I think it was the goal of John Strand, and tell me if I'm wrong, to display this gentler political discourse. Have you heard from audience members about whether or not that has resonated?
There's no question it's resonated. We opened the play in 2015 while the Obergefell case, the same-sex marriage case, was being heard. DOMA, Windsor, sets that up. And in that dissent, he was defending traditional marriage. And he said there wasn't really anything in the Constitution that allowed us to, as a court, to say this was constitutional or not. It was a legislation, and he really supported the democratic process. If you don't like it, change the law. Okay. Audiences come in to the play expecting, this crotchety curmudgeon guy who was very funny, but by the end, because he listens and they listen to each other, they come out with hope about the country. And they learn a little bit about the Constitution. No matter what happens in our political landscape, the Constitution will protect us. And if it doesn't, the experiment's over.
He was an originalist.
Totally.
And that shines through in this
play. Absolutely. He would call himself a textualist first, What do these words mean? Let's agree on the words, and then we can decide what we want to do with them, but at least we need to agree on what the words mean.
We're going to have you back, and we're going to talk about your personal relationship with him. You were able to sit in chambers with him, and we're looking forward to hearing about that. Thank you so much, Edward Giro.
Thank you.
The Originalist runs until August 6th here in Washington, D.C. at the Arena stage. Never say never. That's what Pope Francis told an Italian boy who invited the Holy Father on a pilgrimage. TV 2000 says 9-year-old Andrea wrote Francis and asked him to join him on a pilgrimage for his first Holy Communion, and the Holy Father responded saying, "To be with children is my greatest joy. Never say never." Maybe his wish will come true. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We leave you tonight with a look at that famous small step and giant leap. It has been 48 years since the Apollo 11 landed on the moon, and Neil Armstrong became the first human to step onto it. More than 200,000 miles away, 500 million people watched on TV. Good night, and God bless you.